Hello and welcome to Grody UnPrOfesSiOnAL. My name is Justin McMenamy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, we discuss the merits and messes of the modern employee opinion survey. Is it a means by which managers can receive succinct snapshots of employee morale over time? Or is it a mirage in metrics clothing, which does little more than convey that employees must be protected from leadership retaliation? It's a good place to be from. That comment was hand-delivered to me in the first weeks of my career by a mid-career engineer transferring out of the department I had just moved my bride and myself 200 miles to join. It's funny how certain comments, certain conversations become snapshots in time, ominous warnings of what's to come. There's no need to tell all the stories from that season of my career in this episode, but it was the backdrop that I came to experience my first employee opinion survey. Every person has a first employee opinion survey. That first time that you're asked to answer questions about how you think leadership is doing. Leaders tell you that they desire for everyone to indicate their level of satisfaction, the areas of dissatisfaction, and provide feedback to aid them in the pursuit of improving the workplace. To go back to the innocence of believing that real change could come from filling in bubbles, indicating that I strongly disagree that leadership values people development more than throughput. I'll let you guess how the leadership team, which oversaw the cultural destruction of an organization, responded to poor leadership results. Turns out, they didn't care very much. Each person that has worked in corporate America ends up walking the road from optimism in their youth to cynicism in their old age regarding the employee opinion survey. My goal, as always, is to share my perspectives through the lens of my experiences and to have a little fun along the way. First, let's discuss the survey overall. A common leadership belief, which undergirds many a manager who launches an employee opinion survey, is the belief that with proper metrics and rigorous measurement, the whole of a company's existence can be captured numerically. The company's financial state is represented through accounting practices. The company's products are measured through quality and market share metrics. And just the same as we measure how customers feel about us through a survey, we can also measure how employees feel through a survey. The numerical representation of a physical or even relational reality is a central belief of administrative leaders, a belief that business can be boiled down to a numbers game. Businesses can be managed and directed strictly through proper interpretation and prioritization of the numbers. Typically, this leadership style is not burdened by a desire to engage with the reality behind the numbers, be it employees, customers, suppliers, or production managers. It doesn't matter to them if it's a Dorito factory, a Ford dealership, or an international widget supplier. In fact, some managers believe that engagement with the people of the business could result in emotional entanglement, therefore putting at risk the needed neutrality that they use when considering the proper actions to take. An administrator is a leader who says things like, if it can't be measured, it doesn't exist. Or, if that were true, wouldn't it show up in the numbers? These leaders are bent towards believing the numbers tell the story. They're always just a little bit skeptical of the ability of those on the front lines to understand reality, as they believe that those leaders are deceived by the fog of war. They believe that their impartiality, their lack of entanglement is an asset to their judgment, not a liability. Don't get me wrong, I'm not attempting to throw metrics out of the conversation. I'm merely saying that many organizations fall into the trap of being self-proclaimed metrics-driven organizations, rather than being mission-driven and metrics-informed. This leadership style is based on the false premise that metrics can accurately represent reality and are sensitive to changes across all departments and in all aspects of business. For just one moment here, I want to set aside accounting metrics from employee and customer survey metrics. I want to consider them separately. Currency has no personality. Capital assets don't consider how a decision was made. I have seen where cold, unattached, intelligent leaders are able to manage corporate assets brilliantly. They tend to bury themselves in their spreadsheet and study the numbers from countless angles, and in the end, come to some very creative and insightful solutions. I've also seen that these same leaders apply the same rigorous spreadsheet gymnastics to customer or employee survey results and come to wildly inaccurate conclusions. Without insight into how to motivate and inspire people, these leaders often miss the mark by a wide margin as they attempt to discern numerical metrics that are supposed to represent human behavior and interaction. It's at this point where a business transitions to a metrics-driven organization that the leadership class begins a transition from leaders of people and curators of mission to managers of metrics. My main point here is that many employee opinion surveys taken across corporate America are largely an attempt to numerically quantify human sentiment as a means of understanding the prioritization which managers should place on the category of employee satisfaction when traded off against effort in other categories. It is my observation that the metrification of employee sentiment has a fairly low R-squared. It doesn't accurately represent the nuance of the realities of employee sentiment. Therefore, when leaders put faith in the numeric results and faith in the outcomes that they hope to attain by managing those metrics, oftentimes the outcomes fall categorically short of intention. A second central flaw to the modern employee opinion survey is its anonymity. It must be pointed out that at the very deepest human level, the guarantee of anonymity conveys to employees that they need to be protected from leadership. I get it. At an elementary level, leadership is attempting to convey that for that day, when you fill out the survey, you are safe to give them feedback and there is no possibility of retaliation. But that absolutely conveys that you should be worried about giving feedback to leadership in person without the shroud of anonymity the other 364 days of the year. This might be a dumb comparison, but I'm going to go for it nonetheless. There are a bunch of stores around town that have recently begun placing surveillance trailers in their parking lot. Every night after the store closes, they wheel the trailer into the middle of the parking lot, ensuring that any action that takes place is seen and surveilled. There's even an obnoxious blue light on the top of the pole that draws the attention of anyone that is passing by. Now, these are parking lots in which I have never before thought about or considered my own safety. But now that there's a trailer there, seemingly to aid me in feeling safer, I'm now aware that you are concerned for my safety, which leads me to wonder if I should be concerned for my safety. By touting the anonymity of an employee opinion survey, leadership is in essence telling employees that they must be protected from leadership. Another flaw in the practice of employee opinion surveys is leadership's common sentiment that participation equals interest in the outcome. The aforementioned metrics-driven manager believes that if all of the precincts report, the resulting measurements will provide greater representation of reality. So what do these leaders invariably do? They start by encouraging employees to fill out the survey. They talk about how important the process is, how decisions will be made based on the feedback in the survey, how every comment will be read. But don't worry, anonymity is still there to protect you from us. I want to be clear, I'm good with those things, that's fine. But what always happens next? If one metric is good, two metrics are better. Let's place a metric on the collection of metrics. Each manager is given a team participation goal. As the end date of the survey approaches, invariably participation is nowhere near the goal. So what happens? We initiate a Bring Out the Vote campaign. Participation is encouraged, or better yet, it's manipulated through the promise of rewards or completion rate competition. My all-time favorite was getting to wear jeans on a one given Friday if more than 75% of our division filled out the survey. Let's just step back for a moment and consider the employees that fill out the survey during the applied pressure segment of the campaign. Let's dig into the psychology of that group. Undoubtedly, some employees genuinely forgot to fill out the survey. They are thankful for the reminder to fill it out, and they appreciate the opportunity to show off their dungarees. But more likely, employees that feel coerced into filling out the survey are cynical. They're cynical that the system is a check-the-box exercise. They don't believe their input will result in any substantive change, or they just don't really care. Whatever the case is, I'm guessing that it is not a sincere survey result they are entering. They are begrudgingly filling it out in order to either get off the naughty list or avoid being the reason that the team does not get cupcakes in the break room. My personal favorite was the year that the department head sent out the list of names that had not yet filled out the anonymous survey. Now, before you send me an email at justin@grody.io, I get it. I understand how a system can be designed to know who has filled it out, yet retain results anonymity. But seriously, is that the optics we're going for? We as leaders can't be trusted to handle your feedback in a professional manner, so we have put in place safeguards for your protection. And by the way, here's a list of the 14 people that haven't anonymously filled out their survey. Another gem of a story was one year during the push campaign to hit the target participation rate. I was chatting with the departmental admin one afternoon, and she commented that she needed to fill out the survey. I teased her and I said, "You're going to be the one that prevents me from getting to participate in Silly Hat Day." And she replied, "Oh, I filled out mine. This one is the division manager's. I'm filling out his." Largely unsurprised, I asked, "Well, how satisfied is he this year?" She replied, "He told me to put Max in for all the questions. It's less work for him that way." Well, at least I got to wear my silly hat that year. And finally, on the general topic of employee opinion surveys, the excitement leadership has in the meeting after the close of the survey, it's not a good look. Each time leadership says, "Thanks again for filling out the survey," while it will be a little while until we see consolidated results, and then we will spend some time interpreting the results and setting action plans, it was great to see that we ended up at 85% participation. This is a 3% increase over last year and goes a long way of showing increased engagement and increased passion for seeing the business move forward. No, Bob. It's a sign that I didn't want to be the reason why my department wasn't able to get bagels on Friday, so I went through and filled it out in 30 seconds or less. Let's transition from the act of collecting the data to the process of interpreting the data. One issue that seems to be universal is employees struggle to know whom they are scoring with each question. A survey may ask, "Leadership understands the needs of the employee and invests properly to ensure a robust future." If you work for a company with less than 200 people, that question is fairly straightforward. Leadership is the 4 or 5 people that set the strategic vision for the company. But if you work in a large multinational company inside of a 9-layered organizational pyramid comprising of 65,000 people, who is leadership? Am I answering this question on behalf of the people I know, the leaders I interact with, or with the leaders that I see with Jim Cramer on Mad Money and Squawk on the Street? Now you may ask, what does it matter? The reason it matters is because in a large organization, these numbers are going to be treated as a representation of reality. They are going to be compared to the past and are going to be the baseline for the future. While I disagree with the ability of a single question to fill that role, I would think it would be harder for the results to represent reality when the people filling out the survey are answering dozens of different interpretations of the question. After one survey in my career, local leadership within our department shared that the poor leadership scores were being pinned on them by executive leadership. The following year, we had a departmental meeting headed into the survey to explain who each question was targeting. This organization later attempted to resolve the issue by breaking out most of the leadership questions into a local leadership and an executive leadership version of the same question. As expected, at least by me, the results came back largely in support of local leadership and critical of executive leadership. In a masterful reversal, executive leadership concluded that the poor results that they received were a function of local leadership's inability to accurately articulate the strategy, to be excited about the strategy, and to engender buy-in on the strategy. In essence, executive leadership concluded it is not possible that employees understand the strategy and are voting against it. The only narrative that can fit the data is that the local leaders are failing to properly pitch and frame the corporate strategy. Another common instance is when large reorganizations or large corporate strategies take place. This provides fertile ground for creative narratives to be applied to poor numerical results. If we're headed into a large change, poor results reflect that people were unnerved by the prospect of change. In the year that we implemented the change, poor results reflect that people need time to adapt to the new strategy. And the year after the big change, the results, though they're poor, they're really just a fresh baseline as people become familiar with the new normal. My point here is simple. There is massive effort put in to numerically summarizing the mood and the morale of the organization in order to allow administrative managers to put the numbers into the matrix math. My observation is that in practice, many of the people are filling out the survey under manipulated circumstances. And in instances where the data from the ground level seems to point to a specific issue, artistic license is taken in data interpretation to support the continuation of an already determined direction. If the data most often doesn't accurately represent the true mood, and the interpretation doesn't quite represent the data, what is the purpose of the exercise? Let's now turn our attention to the comments section of the employee opinion survey. In my opinion, there is almost no redeeming quality to the anonymous free text comment section, not for the employee filling it out, nor for the manager attempting to take action from the feedback received. First and foremost, the feedback is unfiltered. By unfiltered, I'm not talking about the company administering the survey, that they should modify the comments before they're delivered to the leadership. I mean that there is no filtration between the head that had the thought and the hand that enters the comment into the survey. Often people don't write through the lens of critical thinking when they are typing anonymously. Each of us has, to some degree, an irrational inner being, an inner voice that is frustrated by small things and believes that our preferences should be universally followed. This is the inner voice that tends to come out either when we're surrounded by a group of our buddies at a sporting event under the influence of social lubrication, or when we're sitting at our computer leaving anonymous comments about our boss and the organization, possibly under the influence of social lubrication. Anonymous comments are neither held accountable for accuracy or tone, and therefore they are often difficult to tie to real situations. People get emotional when they complain, and when they're emotional, they exaggerate, they embellish, and they emphasize in order to accentuate their point. Secondly, the feedback is often unaffiliated with specific situations. With the shroud of anonymity, the writer typically chooses to remove or mask specific details of the issue or instance they are concerned with in order to avoid being identified. This is the exact context which would aid leadership in pinning the concerning behavior, discerning the appropriateness of the concern, and potentially remedying the issue. A comment like, "Leadership should stop sending mixed messages on certain issues." While it does protect the identity of the author, it does not provide any actionable level of detail for leadership, which at a minimum would be aided by knowing, what issue are we even talking about? Thirdly, anonymous feedback is largely inactionable. The reason behind this, it might rub some people the wrong way, but the merit of a given comment is almost entirely dependent on the maturity and the discernment of the employee leaving the comment. Let's take a comment like, "I do not receive fair compensation when compared to the market." On any given team, there are employees that are generally performing above their current salary, and there are employees that are generally performing below their current salary. There are some employees that complain about their salary the moment inflation rises above their annual merit increase. And there are other employees that wouldn't raise a salary issue even in justifiable instances. As a leader, it absolutely depends on which employee it is that raises a concern in regard to how much action and what is the right action that I'm going to take. In any given division, there are some employees that are significantly overpaid for the effort or results that they produce. If they are complaining about their compensation, the proper leadership response is, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I would gladly write you a letter of recommendation for an employer that is able to pay you more competitively." On the other side of the coin, there are employees that have developed so rapidly, have increased their impact so quickly, that you as a leader are behind the scenes fighting policy tooth and nail to get the person raises commiserate with their contributions. If that person says, I don't know that I'm being paid fairly, you run to the CEO and you say, we have got to get this fixed, or we are going to regret this for years. Same comment, completely different leadership response. Another lens by which the comments are largely inactionable is the wide range of comments which are entered. From the perspective of the employee, they are told that their feedback is valuable and will be used in considering how to steer the company and how to improve the workplace. From the perspective of the leader, 100 employees enter in 100 unique comments. They generally fall into 20 or 25 categories: compensation, benefits, product strategy, supervisor behavior, working conditions, process improvements, career opportunities, training opportunities, and on and on and on. Each employee remembers their comment, and throughout the next year will largely view the organization and leadership through the lens of the comment that they left on the survey. But unfortunately, because of the need for vagueness in order to maintain anonymity, leadership doesn't know what many of the comments actually meant. And leadership isn't able to overhaul every aspect of the business each year in response to comments. Invariably, successive surveys ask the employee, did you see meaningful change as a result of the feedback last year? This question is again measured through the lens of the specific comment that was left on last year's survey by the employee. Therefore, most often the answer is no, and cynicism grows as to the responsiveness of leadership. As a leader, you may have elected to improve the 401k match, or may have chosen to increase the family adoption benefit. Your hope is that employees would view your improvement intentions broadly, that they would see how you are steering in general based on the results of the survey toward the end of improvement. Generally, though, that is not how employees view the survey. They complained about single-ply toilet paper in the bathroom last year. There is still single-ply toilet paper in the bathroom, and therefore, I saw no actions taken as a result of last year's survey. There is a completely logical discussion that can be had with this employee, imploring them to see the broader intentions of leadership, to improve the workplace, and the role of the comments as a windsock regarding employee sentiment. That's not what was sold to the employee when leadership was pressing them to fill out the survey. And after the fact, no one is equipped to have the discussion because leadership doesn't know who it is that is concerned about the toilet paper. One may ask, is there any redeeming value to the anonymous comment section of the survey? Barely, is the short answer. I believe the bad significantly outweighs the good. Having been the recipient of anonymous comments over the years, almost none of them are actionable. They're either too vague, we should be more like we used to be, or too specific. I want to be able to bring my own coffee machine to work. The rest of the comments broadly fall into categories like career growth, compensation, training opportunities, stumping for fringe benefits, or improvements in the tools of the workplace. These categories rarely change. Maybe if you squint just enough, you may be able to stack rank the relative importance of each of these categories based on how often they're mentioned. But in general, you find yourself as a leader attempting to tie things you were probably already going to do to the standing categories of concern within the survey comments. It's really the only way I know to make a meal out of the dog's breakfast that is the anonymous comment section of the employee opinion survey. So what instead? I am a big believer in face-to-face, candid, honest, and constructive feedback. Admittedly, Face-to-face, candid, and constructive feedback puts a fair bit of burden on the person providing the feedback. I believe that's a good thing. A large part of providing feedback is engaging with a person in a factual, contemplative, and empathetic manner. Placing yourself in the other person's shoes, attempting to understand the cause for the issue in the first place, and then providing a recommendation along with the identification of the issue. That burden of proof and demonstration of thoughtfulness on the provider of feedback is enough to sift the junk from the jewels. The stuff that doesn't really matter, it just doesn't come up because the process of preparing feedback will act to dissuade people from sharing trivial things. Reed Hastings, founder and former CEO of Netflix, enacted the rule that you can only say something about someone that you are willing to say to their face. No anonymous feedback. Hastings points out this rule either presses someone towards radical candor or radical silence. It must be noted, however, an organization which has established the pattern of anonymous feedback is not able to flip overnight to a culture of candid face-to-face feedback. There is work that must be done, and most often that work falls on leadership to demonstrate the change through action and word. Remember, even if leadership is humble and approachable, the terms of the anonymous employee opinion survey communicated non-verbally that employees need protection from retaliation. Simply removing the veil and telling people it's open season on feedback will not move the organization toward health. First and foremost, the leader must demonstrate the proper receipt of feedback. This is done by publicly sharing feedback they have received, as well as the journey they traveled from the moment they received the feedback through the period of digestion and finally into the period of action. This public demonstration is both an event demarcated by presentation and reinforced regularly by candid testimony of progress and regression against improving upon the feedback. It should, over time, become normal to hear a leader mention that they are working to improve in a specific area, and to admit when relapses take place in pursuit of enlisting others to help in their improvement journey. One point of clarity. If possible, leaders should tell the stories of feedback that they received in an open, honest, and constructive manner. Feedback that was given to them face to face. If the leader's story starts with, "The employee opinion survey said that my breath smells like coffee, so now I carry mints with me and pop one before each meeting," you are reinforcing the need for anonymity. Rather, if it can, the story should go, "Sally demonstrated that she cares for me by telling me after a meeting with a client that on occasion my breath carries the aftershocks of my morning cup of coffee. And there's potential for that to affect our company and how our brand is represented. So now I carry with me mints to use before meetings. Thank you, Sally, for caring for me, for the customer, and the company." I would also ask anyone in the division, if you notice my breath is a hindrance to progress, please help me improve. Help me to know when I am unknowingly causing an issue. This interaction shows humility, openness to feedback, thankfulness for candor, and a desire for greater self-awareness. This is far better than the experience which many of us have suffered through, in which the manager calls a division meeting and puts all of the anonymous comments on the screen for everyone to read, and then states, I don't understand where half of this stuff comes from. Is anybody going to tell me when I do this stuff? There are few professional environments as awkward as the meeting that follows. Quick story. I had a supervisor that year in and year out, he would do this. He would show all of the comments that he had gotten on the wall for everyone to read, in hopes that candid and constructive conversation would somehow spontaneously erupt out of the awkwardness. Now, I typically enjoy running social experiments, and especially during otherwise socially awkward situations. And this meeting, this situation met all the criteria for experimentation. So during the annual employee opinion survey, I chose to rail on a huge concern that I had regarding the working conditions that we had been forced to survive in. On a regular basis after lunch, I would head to the bathroom for some afternoon paperwork and would find that each of the stalls were full. This caused me to either wait uncomfortably or to walk across the quad to another building in search of a porcelain private office. I chose this as the single issue most tied to my employee satisfaction, singularly hoping that the comment would be shown on the wall after the survey results came back, leading to a hysterical reaction. I chose to invent and then rail against the deplorable holes to bowls ratio in our facility. It's just not possible to have a collaborative, creative, and continent work environment with the holes to bowls ratio where it has been allowed to stay for years. Needless to say, a great laugh was shared by all as the organization read the supposedly anonymous survey comments on the wall. Back to our regularly scheduled program. In regard to implementing candid, face-to-face feedback within an organization, I would caution a leader to delay the institution of them providing feedback to others until they have shown the organization how to graciously receive and respond to feedback. As a leader, you must first be known to be a gracious receiver of feedback before you will be considered a gracious administrator of feedback to others. Next on the list, for leaders seeking to implement an environment of constructive face-to-face feedback, ensure that each complaint which comes across your desk has first been delivered to the target of the complaint. As a leader, there can be a daily barrage of concerns and complaints from employees about other parts of the company or about other employees. In my experience, most of them are rooted in some accuracy, but have been creatively and sometimes unknowingly embellished by the time they make their way to the leader. It is not the role of a leader in a mature organization to intervene in the nuisance layer of employee interactions. Comments that started with "purchasing always," "Steve never," or "when will accounting ever realize?" Whenever that happened, I would simply ask, "Have you talked with them yet?" Most of the time, that was the end of the conversation. The person sharing the information was either blowing off steam, hadn't witnessed the instance themselves, or they concluded that the effort that went into giving feedback properly, the problem just wasn't worth that effort. Most often, employees are more than willing to have the leader carry the water, engage in the awkwardness. But by putting the burden on them to provide candid, honest, face-to-face feedback, all of a sudden the calculus changes. They're not as willing to nitpick every little thing. There will be instances where employees attempt to share feedback with one another and the interaction does not go well. In that instance, myself as the leader, I would typically engage with the other employee on how they receive feedback, rather than the specific topic of the feedback? What about the person that has a legitimate retaliation concern? I do believe there needs to be a check down receiver, somewhere that an employee can go in situations where they are neither positioned or equipped to properly provide feedback. But I do believe that this is a rare exception, not the rule. In my experience, HR is the appropriate place for employees to seek counsel if they do not otherwise feel safe to provide feedback. As we wrap, I understand the underlying logic of the modern employee opinion survey. At its best, it is a good faith effort by leadership to provide a mechanism for all employees to have a virtual audience with leadership and to provide feedback on how things are going. In practice, I don't know that the benefits outweigh the cost. For most employees, they see that leaders are most concerned that you fill out the survey, not how you fill out the survey. Employees see that the numerical analysis is usually overplotted with existing leadership initiatives, directives, and biases, and the whole construct, for good reason or not, is set up to protect the employee from their leadership rather than promote candid, mature human interaction. The modern employee opinion survey promotes a culture of secrecy and gossip, which is nothing but a hindrance to teamwork, candor, and the rapid movement towards a goal. I have always believed that information flows fastest along relationship lines. The modern employee opinion survey largely acts as a relationship blocker between leaders and their organizations. So for that reason, I am not a fan. For those that wish to share comments, praises, large sums of money, or simply to let me know you're out there, you can reach me at justin@grody.io. For those with complaints, concerns, frustrations, or accusations, you can reach me via anonymous letter sent through the mail. If you wouldn't mind, just vaguely detail your concerns with me, with the podcast, or even with American society in general. I assure you, each submission will be treated anonymously and in the order in which it was received. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.